Three and two and one, two, three. We are live. Welcome to reality. Welcome to the third episode
Third.
of the Paradoxilectic podcast.
Today.
Yeah,
What?
it shifts. It sometimes it's paradialectic, sometimes it's paradoxilectic. Maybe it's a little bit of both at different times, and that's exactly what we're talking about here today.
It's delectable either way.
It's
Yeah.
paradialectic delectable.
Yeah.
And today we're talking about groups, and we are a group right now. We are a triad.
Group. Yes. And tribes and chosen families and all of the other secret societies. All of the other forms that this takes.
Other specific nouns for things of this sort would be like, well, cult has a particular definition, but
I've been in one or two of those over the years.
Maybe gaggles. Wait, no, gaggle doesn't count because you can become a gaggle just by walking together for a few moments.
A murder, yeah.
You get a gaggle.
A grumble. A grumble is a tribe of pugs.
A grumble. A what?
A grumble.
A tribe of pugs.
Oh, that's awesome. That sounds so damn cute.
Does each little subspecies, what do you call that? Breed? Does each breed of dog have a name like Murder of Crows for its grouping?
We're gonna say it does now, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I think most of them are packs, but the pugs are so awkward that they're not quite a dog anymore.
So is it a terror of chihuahuas?
Terror, yeah, probably.
My Lord. Well, we're talking about how these group identities and the how groups can bring out both the best and sometimes maybe even the worst of humans. It does seem like when we do consequential stuff, we tend to do it together. There's a proverb: you want to go somewhere fast, you go alone. You want to go somewhere far, you make a team. So we're talking about how getting together to do a particular or general thing, like one of the groups that I think each of us three has dabbled in is that of the Burning Man community. Perhaps we've even referred to ourselves and each other as burners.
On occasion.
Yeah. So that's one that I could say a lot of positivity and goodness has been brought to my life, and I've been able to achieve things as an individual and with others because of the group, which is sometimes a tribe, which it includes several chosen family gaggles, grumbles of mine. Yeah, but there are always these little downsides to each thing.
And that brings us to the kind of theme of all of these podcasts for us, which is a duffel bag of seals. Wow. Sorry, that just came up on the live comments there.
Your comment could make us tangent off into another
that was a good comment.
Lane of the labyrinth. Rich says a duffel bag of seals. Is that the actual
It is now.
Group of seals?
Oh, well. So the idea here is we're talking about the paradoxes, the dichotomies that come up when trying to navigate a group as an individual in a group, as a leader in a group, as someone who's forming a group, as someone who's coming into a group. There's going to be pros and cons to both. And I think there's a big difference when you have a group that's for something rather than a group that's fighting against something. I think it's kind of timely at this point in Michigan that we had a group very stringently against something in a very dramatic way that could have turned out a lot worse than it did. And that's an example where you have other groups that are really about creating something or bringing something to existence, which I think feels really different.
Well, just for the listeners who are listening in 2036, or the ones who are listening in 2007 because they got in their time machine in 2036. What was that group in Michigan that was against something, or is? I think they're still quite
still are
doing it.
Still are. So it was the people protesting against the virus lockdown and Governor Whitmer and her evil ways. So and doing so armed, very visibly armed with very powerful weapons. And I am personally someone to the CPL. I'm a martial arts instructor. I believe in defending yourself. And that was a pretty strong expression for needing to close down for a month or two.
Yes, and I have some humor words here, but it also goes to a point that it seems like when you form a group, or when you form a group that is supposed to be against a group or against a thing, there is almost immediately you generate groups that are against your group that is against the thing. And my friend Matthew Patterson, I call him the Mizzard. He says, my favorite nicknames for the armed quarantine protesters so far: Vanilla ISIS, the Gravy Seals, Y'all Qaeda, the Irrational Guard, Branch Covidians, Hillbilly Hamas, Flu Flux Clan, and Cosplaytriots, like cosplaying patriots. Yeah, so like that, just to show that as soon as you do something like that, now there's the people who feel a group identity, who feel akin to each other because and we hate that thing that hates this thing. It's
and I think that this is the thing. I think there's a lot of people who've been in a group waiting for the thing that they hate in order to do something that crosses the lowest possible threshold so they could make a demonstration against it. And I think that this happens a lot when you form a group that's about abolishing something or fighting something or against an eventual threat. You're just kind of waiting around for that threat. And that can cause you, I think, to jump the gun a bit. Now, that doesn't mean that some people within that protest, generally out of the thousands there, didn't have some useful good points, but they all get lost to that extremism, I think, is one of the challenges. And we're talking about dialectics. We're really looking at finding that kind of wise middle in between those two extremes. And I think they'll get drowned out by actions that extreme. And I also think that happened on the other side in like the Occupy movement years ago. And Zach, you and I talked about that previously, where I think there was a lot of solid, nuanced messages, but that's not what got covered.
Yeah, and
the absurdity is what gets covered.
I was physically present for a bunch of that, and felt a strong. It wasn't so much an identity, but you were in a movement. There was a current, and it was very inspiring to me for a bit. And then I started looking around, and it's kind of, I think this is irony that it became the group that I kind of founded and formed, the Knights of Nonsense, and Nonsense Night is to be defined by not being definable, and shall not be defined. Occupy movement kind of had this like unwritten rule within it of, we don't get specific demands. We remain general and vague. And it just started to occur to me, like, what's the thing that we've got to be camping? Like, people, like, this is it seemed to some of the things that are some of the downsides of groups, or what tends to go wrong or get silly or stupid with groups and groups' identities and movements, weren't present with that, and got to see where the failings are of not having specifications, of not having a way to render what we agree to.
Well, there was a lack of action. There's a lack of actionable and then what's with the Occupy movement. Became just a meme, honestly. And it's a powerful meme that's very much real. The 1% is real. And now it's in our collective consciousness now that there are this powerful elite that have most of the power. But then what was kind of where they fell short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also got paired with blue team, liberal, Democrat, and that also took a lot of the steam out of it. And that's something that I really hope for. I would say as far as the American politics is concerned, I think the main thing that is stopping us from any really substantive, positive movement and change is this left, right, red, blue thing. What could unify something that there's been so much, the polarizing is so deeply set in, it almost feels like hardware at this point. But
we need a purple team. We need that Buddhist middle way.
And I think that's a little bit of what we're kind of talking about here, which is that wise middle, that, like you said, that Buddhist middle way, which is, how do you balance the fact that poverty kills people, and people who've put their life into a new business and they mortgage their home in order to do this, and that their entire identity is in this, and then all of a sudden the entire economy closes down. I mean, it's not just about getting your hair cut and your nails did. It's about people's livelihoods in many cases. What happens to the person who is just about to retire and now their life savings is gone and now they can't work? Like, that is terrifying. What happens to the extrovert that's used to being around people all the time and no longer is? And for some people, that's really hard. And do these people get to talk? Do they get to have a discussion on the kind of left side of the discussion? If all your friends are on that side of the discussion, do you get to talk about those things? Right? And maybe not in maybe a social media context where that polarization is so strong, so judgmental, and so reactive.
Yeah, I don't think the post-COVID agrophobic society is going to be formed organically, I think.
Right. No, that'd be a little tough. And it's and that's the thing is, so how do we kind of make room to have a voice about an opinion that's different, where we go, hey, I kind of think that locking down is good if you're more on the right side of the discussion because of these reasons, because my grandma, she's not doing so well. And then people shut you down for like not being for freedom and not being for the economy. And how do you stand up to that within that sort of group? And on the other side, how do you go, hey, I need money, I need contact with people, and I get that we like, you all want to stay locked down for 2 years, but I need to open up soon or I'm going to go crazy. Yeah. Like, those are both very real arguments that I think we need to find ways to help people have within each of the groups.
Yeah. Well, and again, for those listening in 2074 or the time travelers listening in 1985 on their massive one of the early computers that was the size of a garage, there is an epidemic, a pandemic, a global pandemic, the first like truly global pandemic
since 1918.
But was that getting everywhere?
Yeah, it was. I think
absolutely everywhere.
Global. Yeah,
because now okay. So this was the one thing that is truly unprecedented about this. This is the first time that the entire globe. I think that if you're in the bushes of Africa, you heard about this. This seems to be.
We have the internet. We have that communication, which, thank God, we can still maintain our communities,
right? Just in a different
and our sanity.
Yeah, that does help a lot.
Yeah, and our and we can maintain, perhaps not in the same way, definitely not in the same way, but Burning Man as a group and a community. As soon as I heard that Burning Man 2020 was canceled, it's like, well, the stuff that we do is just going to take other forms. And so, I mean, and that's an example of the extremely positive effect of getting together as a group, is that you can take away, you can change the circumstances, and the group creative adaptability factor is so strengthened by our having this this idea that we've built together that has so much inertia and momentum.
And so I guess we talked before, you mentioned before that all three of us have been involved with Burning Man. And for me, what was so unique about Burning Man was that previous to that, I was much more of an individualist. I didn't like to join groups. I mean, I ran a martial arts studio. I was part of a martial arts community. I worked in the Renaissance Festival when I was a teenager until my early 20s. So that was kind of a crowd. I was like part of the individualists in black in the back of my high school English class, reading dark poetry, listening to industrial music. So that was a group. But besides that, I didn't consider myself as part of a group, because I always thought that being part of a community meant conformity. I thought that I had to give up who I was to be part of that thing. And that was something I wasn't going to do. And I got drugged kicking and screaming to Burning Man back in 2003. And as a libertarian, I was looking around me like, oh, you fucking hippies. And but what happened was, I loved art, and I'd stopped doing art because I'd gotten jaded and cynical. I'm like, what's my art going to do? It's going to show up in like a coffee house wall or a corporate lawn. It's not going to affect anybody. Why do it? And I started seeing this art that was blowing my mind. And I'm like, holy shit, again and again. And I realized that every time it happened, that art that big and that unusual and that mind blowing only happened because it was part of a community.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that there was a group of people, and I saw people who were like, they were bikers and truckers over here. You had the yoga kids and the hoopers over here. You had roller disco. You had DPW. You had the old, like, I used to be back here with shotguns shooting at propane tanks and blowing them up crew. Like, this was the most I've ever seen any community encourage individual expression. And that's kind of what sold me. And I think that really speaks to something very unique about the Burning Man community and those communities connected to it, which is that tolerance for differences among people that isn't just paid lip service to, that's actually directly encouraged.
And I think the differences between, so what you listed beforehand, like the kid in all black reading dark poetry, or like me as the goth kid, the difference between like those, there were communities, but then like the communities that really helped me become a person, the person who I am now, the burner, the fire spinning community, the burner community really helps to work towards a goal. And I think that is just the glue that holds a healthy community together, is when and it can be different goals. I mean, definitely in the burner community, there's different pieces of art, there's different goals which create those different tribes, but having one thing that we're all working towards, that was the glue for me, that made me stick to Burning Man, that made me stick to the other communities that have made me who I am, instead of just the goth kid in the corner.
And that makes me think like Theater Bazaar here in Detroit, which is a huge community that has taken different forms throughout the years, but has always been about building this thing that's bigger than everybody involved. Right?
Yeah, bigger than everyone involved. That's huge.
How did Burning Man start again? How did this get to a thing that it revolved for a lot in a lot of people's minds? It revolves around the event that happens in the Gerlach Desert in Nevada, United States of America, Earth. But how did that go from being a small little party to a thing that attracts 70,000 plus, and now is it a group, a culture, and an identity across the world where many people have never even been to the event or a event? What is that? What is Burning Man for the people listening in 2087?
So Burning Man started back on Baker's Beach in San Francisco, where, if I remember right, one of the founders, Larry Harvey, I think had his heart broken, as can often be the reason to start something new. And went out to build an effigy that was now the famous image of the man with the arms upstretched on Baker's Beach. I think it was in 1986, if that sounds right. And it had there's people who are already there. He had a few friends out, and then everybody got together. And I think he did it again. And then when he tried to do it, I believe I think it was a third time, the authorities were gonna say, we're not gonna let this happen. You can't have that big of a fire here. And this is when he came across the Cacophony. See, he was friends with some members of what was called the Cacophony Society, which was coming out of the Suicide Squad. These are both these very crazy performance art experimental groups in San Francisco that were doing crazy shit, like climbing the Golden Gate Bridge to have a party on the top. Or they would decorate an entire building like in a guerrilla attack and then just kind of run away, or they go party down in the steam tunnels. And these guys realized that they could get away to these salt flats in Nevada where nobody at the time gave a fuck what the hell you did. So as he's looking for a new place, you had the Cacophony Society and then Larry Harvey's group of friends kind of come together and just to start to dress up and have these parties. And then they started to dress up the cars. And then this is where they did like the famous drive-by shooting ranges, where they would get cans of propane and gas tanks and old cars, and they would get shotguns and semi-automatic weapons, and they would drive by in various states of inebriation, shooting at them. So when people call Burning Man a hippie event, that's definitely not how it started. And I think there's always been this underlying spirit of kind of rebellion and extreme expression. And that's always been a kind of a dialectic there. How do you express yourself extremely in shocking ways while not killing the person next to you or causing them such undue harm that they're messed up in some way. We don't want that. So to kind of follow up, you said, how did this turn into a 70,000 person event? Well, a lot of people look at 1996 as being a transitional year, and that was the Helco year. So if you haven't seen it, I highly looking up sometime on YouTube, John Law, Helco, Burning Man. And it was one of the most beautiful videos I've ever seen. John Law is another co-founder of Burning Man that dropped out in 1996. After that year, a lot of the old school guys dropped out because all of the things that happened were, so Helco was this, like taking every corporation and turning it into a devil version of it. So you had McDonald's, and you had Burger King, and you had the Bank of America, all with these horrible names. There's this giant tower of wood that was filled with wood inside. John Law climbed up this. Survival Research Laboratories, if you know about these guys, have killer robots with chainsaws and flamethrowers. This is back in like 1996, doing stuff that you don't see these days. You had devils, you had people convorting very little clothes, you had pig heads on spikes. And as he climbed up, the whole structure underneath him lit on fire. I think they had filled it with gasoline. And there was neon signs. He jumped on a zip line just as the flames were kind of engulfing his legs, goes down the zip line, breaks through the neon sign, and lands safely on the edge.
That's kind of a good example of a both. Like, we're talking pros and cons, how it brings out the best and worst of us. So, you know, that folks get together and doing something really cool and dangerous, and it's real and cool and dangerous, and maybe nobody gets hurt, or it's really cool and dangerous and a tent gets ran over.
That's the year that happened. And I actually met the woman who got ran over. So when we had the DFG, she came to practice for a few months. And so what had happened that year was there were no roads at Burning Man at that time. And that same night that Helco happened, somebody did a lot of a certain substance. They had a car. Their car was going across. It hit some rebar. It either ripped open, I can't remember the battery or the radiator, but something not good. And this woman was in her tent. The tent got rolled over. She got wrapped up like a burrito. And then either the radiator fluid or the battery acid started dripping onto her shoulder. And then actually you could see her scars from where she got run over. And it was her lawsuit that ended up leading to there being roads at Burning Man the next year in 1997. And so sometimes this evolution happens because people want freedom. They want this group that allows crazy things to happen. And eventually you have to rein things back in. And this is where you're going to start to lose certain people who were in the original group who go, this is too corporate, I'm out. But if you didn't do something there, it would have gotten even more dangerous. It would have gotten shut down. So you have to find that balance between the two.
And there's something to be said about creating boundaries. And like when you have that safety net, it actually becomes a place where more people can push their own boundaries within that safety net. If you have, can you see me? My computer just went weird. Okay. Technology.
Here, like.
There we go. So there's a study that had, it was studying little kids within a playground. So a playground compared to a field. And they found that the kids would explore the entire playground because there was a boundary, but the kids wouldn't stray that far if they were just in a big open field. And that same kind of thing can be said if we have a couple little boundaries, if we have those roads where we know that we're safe, then we might feel safe enough to explore some other deeper parts of ourselves and of the surroundings.
I love that you're a psychology nerd. I use that same example all the time. So,
and then it's like you have something that begins as an organic, just a dyad, triad, quartet, just a gaggle of grouping, and you can become a tribe, chosen family, and then eventually can grow to something like how Burning Man did, to the point where when you're at Black Rock City, Burning Man proper, it's like a government. It has something that is like a little temporary nation state, and so that's like well, the ultimate in sense of like really solidifying, crystallizing, and having a more rigid constitution is like from the group of friends to the nation state, like groups, you know.
Right.
And some things want to remain as undefined and undefinable as possible, and some things want to get as defined as possible, and then make it part of their constitution to not change so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that transition between, I wonder what the number really is between having just a quartet, say, doesn't need too much organization, but as you grow and grow and more voices want to be heard, there needs to be some sort of organization to have those voices be heard. So it's, I mean, similar to how we saw Theatre Bazaar grow and how they needed more of a structure. It doesn't necessarily need to be a hierarchy, but their structures are helpful in communities.
And I think that like that same progression with Burning Man happened with both here in Detroit, the Detroit Fire Guild and the Theatre Bazaar, where in the early days, like the things that both groups were getting away with was pretty outrageous. And eventually it got to the size where you couldn't do what you used to do with 20 people or several hundred people when there was thousands of people involved. And you were now in public venues. Like you have to change how things work at that time, but still somehow keep that wildness. And I think that that's kind of the key. Burning Man did it. I mean, last time I was at Burning Man, they had the car kebab, which was a bunch of abandoned cars on a giant spike that you could climb up and go to the bar, which is an RV at the top. And it was definitely not OSHA approved. And eventually someone did fall off and break something, which is kind of what happens.
Oh, it was Tetanus City. It was so clear to me. It was funny. I saw this art piece, and you look at it, it's just a stack of cars skewered, and they're rusty, and there's jagged shit coming off of them, and it's just like some people would look at it and be like, somebody's gonna fall from that and die. I'm looking at it, it's like somebody's gonna cut a major artery and die. they're gonna fall. They're going to fall after having bled to death. If not, they'll crawl down and they'll have tetanus. But that is part of the ethos is Burning Man is that libertarian in the individual making their choices and maybe fucking around and finding out to the point of personal injury or death. You know, this is something that well, sometimes I applaud, and other times, like right now in this pandemic, some will judge me for this as being insufficiently anarchistic enough to be cool. But there's times I'm looking around right now and I'm like, yeah, I think it would make sense for there to be some rules for a bit. Hospitals being overwhelmed is something that I think is to be avoided, even at the cost of personal freedom temporarily for a bit, because we don't always make the best choices as groups or individuals.
Yeah, this again, it's that balance between the rules, but I mean that beauty of you can get hurt, you can die at Burning Man. That's part of what makes it so beautiful. That's part of what makes Theatre Bazaar so beautiful is these extremes. It's practice for real life. Real life can hurt. Real life can kill you. Don't be dumb, but walk that line because it's exciting.
And that's the thing is I think that's one of the things that certain groups cause people to lose is this sense that we always need to be safe all of the time. And that if we are challenged and we are made uncomfortable, that in itself is bad. And I think that on the farthest extremes, it is bad. Like if someone's being malicious, if there is physical harm happening, if someone is trying to get one up on other for material gain, like those things are objectively bad, you need to stop them. And part of what we're talking about here is creative communities. And how do you, and this is why I think one of the dialectics, one of the challenges of creative communities is how can you be open to people who are open in different ways than you are? How, whether their approach to sexuality is different, or their sense of politics is different, or their approach to gender is different. How do you make room for that diversity of choice, even when that other person's sense of that diversity of choice is different than yours? Hello.
Maybe ask Chris Orozco that very question.
This was very sudden. I didn't think I'd just be joining. Hi, everyone.
Oh,
What question are we asking?
So we're asking in groups, especially groups in creative communities, how do you maintain a sense of non-judgment when people are tolerant of things in different ways that you are, whether that is politically, whether that has to do with gender, whether that has to do with sexuality, or just a person's ability to be awkward because they're trying something new and they're not meaning harm, but they make someone uncomfortable, because that's kind of what creativity is. But if that goes too far or is taken advantage of, that could be predatory or manipulative, and we definitely don't want that. So how do you find that middle ground? Just a light question to bring you in,
Yeah, wow, okay. Just going 0 to 100. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So the first one, I find emotional personal responsibility is the #1 antidote to that. Where if somebody says something that makes me feel a certain way and I want to no longer tolerate them or have them not think what they're thinking or just do some kind of irrational thing that is less than helpful, it's just because I'm having an emotional reaction and they remind me of me. And so if I can own that they're just reminding me of me, then if I make peace with the part of me that they're reminding me of, then they stop being a problem. And even then I can understand them more. I can have more compassion for them. I can more skillfully communicate with them and possibly even bridge that gap. But if I don't do that, and if I don't take that personal responsibility, then there's no hope for communication, which I think is what brings up this question in the first place, is because that's what we see most of the time. But the other question is way harder, because that actually has negative impacts on people that can be measured and that can sometimes take years to overcome. So it's like that's actually a punishable offense.
Yeah.
And it should be, to maintain safeties of containers and communities and all those things. So that's a harder one, because it's like you have to deal with the underpinnings, like the mental and emotional underpinnings of why a person did that in the first place, while managing symptoms and keeping the container safe. And that's tremendously difficult. And that's something that I don't honestly have any idea how people do skillfully, especially people who run like sex positive communities. Like that is a level of complexity that I don't even know. Maybe you guys probably have better answers for that one.
Well, for that one, that's something that kind of being part of the Burning Man community here in Detroit for over 15 years, had to deal with many times, which is people would come to kind of these, and there's no leaders, right? There's kind of these people who are like kind of at the center of the community. And when there's issues, people often go to them. And myself and Doxy and Cookie and people like that are people that people have gone to with these things. And it's sometimes been the hardest and some of the most stressful things I've had to deal with in my life, especially when it's not when it's because nobody wants to deal with that. Nobody wants to walk into that, and I don't want to walk into that. But if no one else is going to walk into it, I kind of feel like you kind of need to. And I guess the easy thing to do is that the second there's an accusation that someone's out and banned, but that's also damaging and painful.
Oh yeah.
Right? So what we would often do is that we would spend months talking with people. And there's been times where we have gone to the police, we have gone to the authorities with different things. And there's been other times where we've talked to people and we've seen that person change over the years. And sometimes we've had people very upset that we didn't automatically take one side or the other. And oftentimes we're upset at both sides because we're trying to walk down the middle. I don't recommend it if you want nights of peaceful sleep. But at the same time, I think that people have to do it if you're going to have a creative community where people are expressing themselves and being awkward and making mistakes. Because when you're open, there will be people who try to take advantage of it. And there will also be people who just honestly are trying to figure out how to be in their skin and how to interact with other people. And you got to walk that line, and it's hard.
And how to be part of like these type of communities that we're discussing are so outside of the norm, are so outside of what everyday people even have available to them or what they know is available to them. So when they walk into our communities, I mean, having the principles is so essential, I think, for the Burning Man community and that's been put in the FG community, that's been put in a lot of other communities because it's so helpful. And it kind of starts with that lesson. If someone is open enough and is listening enough and wants to be a part of this community enough, then it takes some patience and some teaching yeah, we have seen people change for the much better, and that's really powerful but difficult work, especially at Burning Man, where you want to go play. Like, you're there to go play, and then you're being put into this leadership position, and that's, yeah, people can get jaded from that for sure.
So Burning Man is a thing and a group, and sometimes a group identity that I think each four of us at times felt the group identity thing, and definitely have fully participated in it as a thing that is happening as a group of humans. I would like to ask now, what for each of us to list some groups and groups identities over the course of our lives that we have been a part of at different times, and then maybe we can find from that like the compare and contrast, because some things seem to just be they don't go beyond that. They're a definition, and there's something that some people have in common, and maybe we have some get-togethers about this. And then there's things that can get incredibly defined by having a mission, having an agreed upon game. Would anyone like to begin?
So I think that, so Chris, just meeting you here, but I know at least three of us kind of had like a goth kind of industrial background there. So
I'm actually working. Mine was punk. I'm actually working on my jacket right now.
Look at that. Nice.
Yeah, mine was punk rock. I was a raver. Got into Burning Man. I tried all the things. You know, I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, and so like I didn't really have any sense of. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere, and so I just, like, constantly threw stuff at the wall. And I was like, well, maybe here, and like maybe here, and maybe here. But it is actually interesting that Burning Man was the first one where I felt like I could chill out. So I was like, okay, I can be done, because it's like it has room for everything. You know,
you can be a punk there, you can be a hippie there, you can probably be a Jehovah's Witness there.
It's like a group that's defined by a game more so than shared interests. Right? Because I don't know if it's to call it a game. I mean, yeah, I mean, like the game of Burning Man to me is like, let's see how much novelty we can produce together, or just how much direct experience we can have. How much can we freedom without ruin?
Even then, there's like subcultures within burners.
Exactly.
You know, the hippie burners won't necessarily get along like with this other subset of burners, and like they're on completely opposite sides of the play, like for damn good reason. And I think that's one of the really interesting things about Burning Man is like it's not for one type of person.
Yeah.
Right.
But then you're in a mall and you're walking and you see somebody else who maybe visually appears to you as another burner, even though they're on the other side of the 3D sphere graph of what sorts of burners. It's like, hey, and we're both burners now. At Burning Man, we're way fucking different burners. You know.
But we still have these principles that bring us together, and like having that. You can look across the room and know you have a similarity with someone. That's why I got dreads back when I was in high school. I got dreads and realized that I could look across the food court at someone at the mall and know I might have a little bit in common with that person. Yeah, and that was kind of the beginning of my like tribal identity, if you will. After goth, same kind of thing though. I wore all black. If other people wore all black, I might have something in common with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Very much so. For me, then what's kind of different than this? I mean, these are a lot of the creative communities. There was, for me, law school was mind blowing. So for a year, it was actually I missed the first week of law school for my first time at Burning Man. And my civil procedure professor didn't know where I went, but she knew I had too much fun and it wasn't law. So she never forgave me. But it was really weird to try to be in this community because I was smart and bad at math. And I had done a previous career where I didn't make that much money. So why not law? And then I found out quickly, why not law? Because here was a group of people where I kind of found the misfits within the law school. But even so, when that group would go with the bar to other law students, they were talking about the BMWs and the Benz that they wanted and the kind of how they want their McMansions to be structured and like what they were going to do with all this money. And like, even like that was not my identity. It didn't fit me. And I felt myself quickly becoming very uncomfortable. And I realized that I'm really glad I did it because it exposed me to a way of thinking that I didn't get immersed in anywhere else. And so whether that was my contracts professor, where literally, and I think Zach, you'll appreciate this kind of experience, I had to listen to him for like a week and a half before I understood what he was saying. He was speaking English, but it was in such a way, it was so profound, like he was such a genius that I couldn't translate it until about a week and a half in. They started making sense to me. So having that sort of experience and interacting with people on that level was wonderful. I just couldn't sustain it. It didn't fit. So I'm wondering if other people had experiences where they got drawn into a community that one part of them resonated with, but the rest of you just didn't, and what that was like.
For sure. I don't hang out with other punks. I don't vibe with the politics of it. I have my very own ideas and stuff, but just because I grew up on a thing doesn't mean I'm going to take it to my adulthood.
Yeah, so you're kind of like into the thing itself without being interested in the group aspect.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, I have an interesting and laughable and shall get me retroactively judged. I can always say that this happened between ages 14 and 17. I want to be very specific that it was only between ages 14 and 17, quite possibly the stupidest and most suggestible and most easily led years of one's life. I was, or at least was presenting as a juggalo. This is true. Juggalo being the fandom, the group identity, the community, the family of.
What a tribe, honestly.
Right.
What a fucking tribe.
Yeah, and it's amazing how many of our very close friends have been juggalos. Like, there's a surprising number. And yeah, right. So
yeah, I had the thing where I had the special twisted hair and everything, and I did the paint. I liked the band Twisted more than ICP because I found them to have intellectual value at the time, more so because I liked rap and I liked gothy dark things. And well, when in retrospect, looking back, what drew me to that thing and that group identity was that it got me excluded and avoided by people that I wanted to be avoided by. And very interesting looking back that other kids in my high school started wearing the juggalo garb, adorning the jerseys and such, and like doing the hair things and certain ways of signaling that you are getting into juggaloism. And I shunned them and was mad at them for doing the thing that was supposed to make me an individual. I didn't know how to truly individual yet, so I wanted to do something that was at least unique in comparison to other things. Like, you know, I saw that there's preps and there's the gothy punky kids and whatnot, but what can I do that is disgusting to all of these things? And it was that, and it worked for a while. For me. And
did you paint your face?
Sure, I went to the gathering of the Juggalos, which is their Burning Man, which is their festival. And really interesting thing that has been I think this has been huge for my personal development and understanding of groups. And this is why in my dealings with Burning Man, like I never refer to myself as a burner. And it's kind of SLC punk reference to me of like, you know, you're so anti-conformist that at some point you find yourself conforming to anti-conformity sort of thing. I've like always been like, I'm not a burner. Yeah, I go to Burning Man, but like, something that made that attitude in me of just to have a really intense intellectual self-defense, sometimes to my own detriment, of feeling the good stuff of community from Burning Man particularly. I feel like I hadn't leaned into the community of that. Well, over this now, but anyway, I got to have the experience of going to the gathering of the Juggalos several years after I had long departed from that shit. And I would have said it was silly. I went with Army and Jesse Fox and Eli and some others. and to perform, to work, to perform at the Gathering of the Juggalos as a circus sideshow act and be paid. So I got to see from outside, and with quite at the time like judgmental eyes. Now I pretty much I observe and absorb and more or less have a good feelings towards all groups that are not groups of anti something, and maybe even you hate the right thing at some time. Anyway, I went to the Gathering of the Juggalos as a recovered as an ex-member. And
so what drew you out of that? So what caused you to kind of de-identify with that group?
Fraternity. Well, the very thing that just I mean, the need to be an individual was something that had such rigid. Started seeing that one of some of its main calling cards, or some of the main defining things, was being an outcast, not by virtue of being so different that no one will accepts you, but kind of just being like, no, fuck you, stay away from me. Like you're just being unaccepting. Like I was very, I could not be friends with someone in high school if I thought that they were preppy or like a normie. And now I look that exact thing. I'm very much look out for that in myself. If someone appears, boring to me or like not novel enough, it's like usually that's exactly the sort of person that I would have the most mutually beneficial friendship from, because I could use a little bending towards not being so bloody, weird for the sake of weird all the time. But
those people make your weirdness seem even cooler.
Huh?
I always feel cooler around those people too.
Yes, yeah.
Little ego boost.
Yeah, it's like my weirdness is so out of the ordinary for them that they marvel at like little things that I do, and I'm like, oh, I never realized how cool that is.
Yeah. Well, and then you can take that another level, because I get that too with just like people seeing my wedding photos and just like, it looks like a movie theater, and it's just, that was just my friends being my friends. They're just really weird. But like showing them that like, we created this, you can too. Like, think about the weirdest thing you want, like, make it happen. There's reality there if you just let it happen.
I wanted to say the analogy of when I went to the Gathering of the Juggalos, because it has a bit about the cult or leadership, well, the follower aspect. Like, I'll never forget this moment of being there I'm very much in an observer capacity. And I'm feeling weird about the years that I'm very much a part of this group. But I'm at this like what do they call a seminar? They're having a seminar. ICP, the Insane Clown Posse, is giving a seminar. And there's thousands of people there, and this is the most exciting seminar. It's ICP. It is them. It is our dear leaders. And there was a moment where he was like, what do y'all think about the Axe Murder Boys, which was a big group on their record label, the Axe Murder Boys. And he says, what about the Axe Murder Boys? And you hear people go like, and he goes, I said, what the fuck do you think about the Axe Murder Boys? Ah, yeah. And it was like, holy shit. Was this when I was in this? Probably. And that thing, the thing that you start to
group think.
Yeah.
Group think can be scary.
So this kind of brings us back to some of these dialectics we're talking about, and we were going to be talking about dependence and interdependence as kind of a thing. And I think you've got both there. Like, you came into it to define yourself as different than other people, and then you found yourself in this group where their people's identities were dependent on each other and being different in the same way. And so how do we kind of elevate that? And how have each of you found a way to elevate that by finding interdependence? That idea that you are who you are as an individual, and you're kind of like supporting or teaming up or being supported by the people around you. And how do you avoid getting lost in that these days when these things come up? Because sometimes even like on Facebook, like with some of these things, I find by myself getting caught up, like, because all my friends are against this thing. And I'm like, wait a minute. Would I actually think about that? And I've got to check myself. So how do you guys do that?
I think it in part comes from the amount of groups that I've been in. It is like there's these little pieces of me. So I was a goth and then I was a hippie, which are very different things. but I somehow sprouted up from that. And then like I was a pagan. Well, I am a pagan. I was Wiccan, but then I learned about Buddhism, but then I learned about Hinduism, and I found the middle path between them. And it's the more that we are, and travel as well, just learning how other people think and being open to how other people think, you start to learn that middle way. So you don't get sucked into one thing or the other. You learn about yourself and what you really actually believe. And on a lot of the times, you can believe two things. You can believe in both of those sides of the dialectical. Yeah. It's like I believe people should be able to have guns, and yet I am still very afraid of guns. Like there's that. But I understand both sides, and like that can be a blessing and a curse too. Because
it's hard because I find a lot of times when I'm talking in that middle path and I'm around people who tend to think in more extreme ways, they always assume I'm arguing against them rather than kind of going, yes, and there's this other piece, which is very different than trying to argue against them. And I think that's one thing I've kind of gotten a little better at is not getting caught up in just because someone starts to argue with me that I buy into that argument. Like to continue to go, no, I get what you're saying, and learn how to validate them a bit more and really listen to them, and then kind of come back at my point a little more slowly and try to hold it with nuance. And then if I find I can't, then maybe I just back off from that person because this would be a lot of big wasted energy there.
It's like that judo move where like someone comes at you with some shit and you're just like, oh, like that's just missing. And so it's like, kind of watch them dissipate their energy, and it's like, okay, cool. Like, can we talk now? If not, then like you said, like, okay, bye.
So sometimes they just keep running at you time and time again, like a drunk bull. Yes.
Amy Lynn on the live comments just said curiosity, which brought up for me, I heard this really lovely quote from, I forgot who exactly it was. I'm really bad at names, but anyway, it was learning about the like parts process in psychology, and so you have all these different parts in your mind that could be seen as the different groups that have influenced you. So I have the hippie, I have the pagan, I have the liberal, I have the other side of that coin, all in my brain. And then every once in a while they go into the living room, and the living room is like what I'm actually projecting myself as. That form of psychology sees this curiosity as being your true self. So everyone, no matter what they've gone through, when you're a little baby, you have love and you have curiosity. And when you part ways with attaching yourself with all these identities in your mind, you come back to that curiosity. And if you can think with that curiosity, you can see all sides of the coin. You can meet people where they are and start to have those hard conversations.
And plus, all those different things that you're talking about all serve distinct purposes. And so it's part of me that loves punk rock is like the part of me that like will die for my integrity. Like that's really fucking important. And then like the part of me that loves raving and going to Burning Man is like the part of me that loves adventure and community, and those things are really important. And then you got your sense of purpose. And so it's like, it makes more sense to do it this way because it gives you a really grounded and well-rounded sense of self. Whereas if you don't do that, you still have all these little parts in you, but they're all fractured, and like some of them are stunted and all like crippled, and they don't have enough room to move around. But if you do, like you said, find the middle ground and find the through line where it's like, yeah, this is a part of me, and this is a part of me, and I can integrate that into a whole, then it's like you get to be a whole human being.
You get to experience all of it. All of it's available.
And I think this gets at the opposite side of that dialectic from curiosity is judgment, right? And I think that sometimes judgment is useful. And this is something because I work with the mindfulness and acceptance-based therapies. Acceptance. Mindfulness is about not judging. So whenever I catch myself in a place like this, I continually ask, okay, well, if I've just been kind of drinking the Kool-Aid that judgment's bad, which is a judgment in itself, well, when is judgment useful? And I find there are times where a lot of times it's the negative thing that's useful like 2% of the time, right? So again, you're not going to see me protesting at the Capitol with an AR-15, but I do have a CPL. right? I don't plan to ever need to use the gun that I have. I'm pretty good at talking my ways out of things, but there's maybe a 1% chance that sometime within the next 20 years I might, and I'd rather have it on me than not. And I think the judgment can be the same way. Like I think each of you are talking about, with all of these different parts inside of ourselves, when we start to notice that we're made up of a multitude, I think that we're going to notice that there's parts of that multitude that we inherently have been judging, and that we have the habit of judging. And that curiosity piece is a way to really bring a new sort of awareness to those parts of ourself, and also to other people in the group that we're having an issue with. And I think, Chris, you said that a lot of times when all of us have a problem with somebody else in a group, is because we see a little bit of them, a little bit of us in them, and it's probably a part of us that we're judging. If that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I really like what Amy said in the comments about the community building starts with the individual. Like that's absolutely brilliant.
Because it's the one thing we can control.
Yeah,
that's how we create our reality, is through our individual self, how we react to the world around us.
So to keep a healthy community, or to have a community, a group, a tribe, a chosen family that is building up individuals and bringing us together as individuals without diminishing our individuality, as Kierkegaard said, when you label me, you negate me. So to be able to have an identifier that brings us together without losing our individual identity to the marching orders, to the mob mentality, the groupthink. It's like a constant check-in of to make sure, like, is this a real democracy, or is there so much momentum now and so much definition here that I think of, like, in America and like U.S. politics. Have you noticed that there's a little bit of polarization? And I recently have been hearing this phrase, and I was being called this by a friend of mine who is not just unapologetically leftist, but just militantly so. And he would say that you're being a woke centrist. Like, because I'm back to this now. There was a moment where I saw there being a chess move in a candidate who's a bit left of center, where I lost sight of this for a bit. But I do think that the team of rivals is the way. You get smarter when you have this sort of peer review. Like, if someone like me has to have their knee-jerk thought checked by someone like a Ben Shapiro, my idea is either going to get smarter when being faced with my antithesis, or I have to find a way to, like, okay, and now I see, because you're coming with the angles from your side. I don't want us to do this sides. And if you're going to say that now instead of two, we'll have these three, like the idea of centrist, like how do we make actual decisions about things if we only have the two sides of the polls?
Well, that's the thing. The diversity is in the middle. Right. So, and I think we need to talk about the power of these extremes, because I think I think part of what makes a mob is the fear of losing approval and inclusion with people who you care about. That this is powerful, and I think it's more powerful than a lot of people admit. There's a lot of memes and a lot of things going around about non-attachment and how you don't care, and I don't think that, like, that's part of another dialectic, because another part is you don't have a community, you don't have a relationship without some degree of attachment, without some degree of a commitment, or you just all be floating through space talking to randomly new people all the time. And that when that fear of those people judging you or ostracizing you or cutting you off for having an opinion or standing up for something that's different from what they believe in, that can be scary and that can be powerful. And I think that this is where that interdependence becomes very hard, because you have to know your own inner group that we're talking about here, those different parts of yourself. You have to have enough of them strong enough to be able to go, you know what? I can handle people who I love and care about and respect not feeling the same about me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also think it's worth saying that the extreme left and the extreme right, like not only is the majority or the center the diversity, but it's also the majority.
Mm-hmm.
Our media and our memes and our internet and everything shows the extremes because that's what gets our attention. But when we're walking around in the grocery store with our gloves and our mask, the majority of people are somewhere in the center too. They're not. We're just being led to believe that we're these polar opposites so that we don't grow too strong to overthrow things that we don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And because people on the extremes are always the loudest ones.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
People in the middle a lot of the times are sitting back and studying and observing and looking and thinking and putting all the pieces together. And they're not just like on their soapbox shouting, because they're putting the pieces together. So in a sense, the people on the extremes are kind of useful in that sense. It's like they give us the information to sift through. But we do need more people in the center being louder, I think.
And I think that's something that personally I become very passionate about, which is how do you define a center in a way that it can in itself be something that people identify with? Because if it's just so diverse that it's this mishmash of things, then you don't build another group that can kind of stand up. And I think there's a difference between like I don't care, I'm not informed center and that wise center where you have put thought into it and you are looking for that ever-changing balance in new circumstances. And I guess that's a question for the three of you and also for the audience. How do you create an identity, a group, a tribe around that wise middle? Because that's something that I feel very challenged by.
Yeah, that's something I've been working on for somewhere between 6 and 9 years. It's kind of like my main thesis for my life is to have that message and that capacity spread to as many people as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the thing that makes it easier is to speak on as foundational and fundamental level as humanly possible. Like I find that the more higher up in surface level stuff you get, the more different we are and the more protective we are over those differences. But the more deep you go and the more fundamental you go on a human level, we're all more similar than we are different.
Yeah.
So when you say deep and fundamental, like what do you mean?
Well, like surface would be like Donald Trump is a good person versus Donald Trump is a bad person. You know, but the deeper thing is I care about my country. I care about good leadership. And so, okay, well, there we have something to talk about.
Got it. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So rather than that judgment on those obvious, shiny, in your face things, to kind of go underneath and go, what are you both passionate about? Why are you even having this conversation? It's clear that both of you care about the country.
Yep.
And I guess when I say that, and I think about my friends on the left, that sometimes saying that you care about the country is even like a controversial thing. But I think that it kind of gets to, because that sounds like patriotism, and patriotism sounds like a way to lose your individuality to someone on the left.
Well,
right?
There's a big thing in that to define America by the nightmares of its past and its faults, when I think the best thing to do with America is you see it as a verb. We are America-ing. And I would like us to America better. They're the best or the best we can. And now I have my own value system and that's where things do fall on this, or we see them as falling on this binary line graph spectrum of left or right, you know, like right now with the pandemic, if we're going to have lockdowns, I think that people having something like a universal basic income, that makes sense in that moment. And that's both authority, which authoritarian moves. I feel like that's been attributed to both being a right thing and a left thing. It just depends on who's in power. If there's Obama in power and he's trying to do some authoritarian shit, it's like, the leftists are always trying to be. They're always trying to be. I love how we both far right and far left will call each other Nazis. We're national socialist, and it's just and right now with this thing, governors and with it seems to me to be our most starkly sick thing about our society right now is the left-right thing. And I don't know how to wiggle out of that in any way other than to call that out for what it is. Like, look, you're dividing your brain. No one is capable of thinking on that line graph. Or if we're going to see it as a
So I think this kind of gets at Mr. Unlikely's comment. Do you want to put that up?
Yes. I don't know the middle necessarily displays any wisdom. I think wise individuals exist throughout this false dichotomy.
So I think that's an interesting thing. And so I've kind of been thinking about that idea quite a bit. And to me, it's not necessarily that that the wisdom's found in the extremes, but wisdom's found in the ability to be flexible throughout the full range of possibilities, given any current situation. So for most of my life, I purposely did not own guns. I was a martial arts instructor. I felt I can talk my way out of most situations. I know the statistics that say that if I have a gun in my household, I am more at risk, and I put people I care about more at risk. So I just chose not to have it. However, I realized, regardless of what you think about Trump, that once he came into office, in my mind, my estimation, that we moved closer to the possibility of civil unrest than I'd ever seen at that point. And I think the recent demonstrations kind of demonstrate that further. So again, I don't believe that I will ever be in a situation that I need to have this gun. I don't usually talk about the fact that I own a gun, but I think it makes a point here, even though I consider myself to be more on the liberal side, more on the left, that I find it's important to be able to embrace this thing that's kind of considered to be part of the right, because it's part of my core desire to survive very chaotic situations should they occur. Yeah. However, I'm still going to argue for gun control in other ways because I also agree with that. And so I think it's that flexibility for me personally that's important. What do you guys think?
And quite honestly, with owning the guns, or like that gives you something that is similar to someone who's on the right. Like finding these similarities. So like, I just bought a farm. All of my neighbors have guns. Now we have guns, and I don't know how to feel about it. But having that conversation with the neighbors, saying, "Yeah, are they all hunt? We all hunt." Like, we have this like line of similarity. Mm-hmm. We're meeting them where they are. So now in their eyes, we're not just some hippies owning the farm next door. There's this level of respect there, and same kind of thing mm-hmm. with farming. So like finding what is similar kind of goes into what Scott was saying about nonviolent communication. Like, what similarities do we have? What common ground do we have? Mm-hmm. Wanting to make America better. Yeah, that can start that conversation that we really, really need between the left and the right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there is wisdom everywhere. Like on the far right, there's wisdom. On the far left, there's mm-hmm. wisdom.
Yeah.
But if you walk the middle path, you have access to all of it.
And yes. I think I like to kind of frame it as the kind of winding middle path. Because sometimes the middle path is being way to the right, and sometimes that the wise thing to do is way to the left. And
which is why that center thing in the Tai Chi symbol is a fucking squiggle.
Is the curve, right? And it's that flexibility, it's that range that I believe personally is so important.
Well, these things apply at different times. More, that's about how I see it. It's like, so we say I fall more to the left or I fall more to the right. How about like the move for this moment in
right now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we're in a fucking truly survivalist situation, if there's fucking zombies and I need to make a barricade and I become a conservative right away. Right. Like, but right now in the situation that we're in, the wealth inequity seems to be like just so stark and sick that I feel like, I mean, universal basic income is the chess move for the moment. It's not the so somebody would say like, oh, that's extremely leftist of you. You are that. It's like, nah, that's like that's where I
right now.
where I see the
Mhm.
right now.
Yeah. And I like the image of the winding path, and that not only applies to politics but religion. And that's something that I've become really, really passionate about, is just being an omnist. And like,
Mhm.
there is so much wisdom in Christianity, there's so much wisdom in Hinduism, there's so much wisdom in all of these places.
Mhm.
Why not wind around them and learn as much as you can from both sides, from all of the sides? Again, it's just creating that more holistic experience as a human.
And doing so respectfully, doing so with sincerity, and doing so with like a loving curiosity as you do it. And that means the Christianity, that means all of these other approaches. And I think that the things that shut that down, and that's sometimes what concerns me, is I think both sides have a tendency to shut that down. And someone put down their toxic tribalism. I think in some ways, like there's elements we can talk about being part of a tribe or a group or a family as a good thing. And then the flip side of that is what keeps us from that flexibility, what keeps us from taking the wisdom that this group has that could save the world, could save us, and what kind of bars us from that knowledge or that understanding. Whereas we also don't want people um, to cheapen that understanding. Like, but at the same time, we don't want to take ourselves too seriously. And I don't want to always take the things I'm involved in too seriously. So how can we also still have some lightness there and some fun with it? Because I think that without that play, without that fun, without that lightness, that's one of the things that causes us to lose flexibility as well. We get terminal seriousness.
Playful curiosity is like the key there, that playfulness in life in general. And the toxic tribalism, it kind of made me think about how when leaders are involved, I feel like that's when it starts to become toxic. When there seems to be this more of a manipulation there. When one person is speaking for the entire left or the entire right or the entire Christianity or the entire Hinduism. Having that collaboration is almost like a check to someone's ego.
I have okay, I think this is a meaningful tangent. I have a thing to say about this. Amy said,
oh, there we go.
It's all good to think about, but I have no loving curiosity for not. And there are 3 knife emojis. I have had this observation about what we call Nazis, that the same thing is kind of going on as when I found Juggaloism. I wanted to be part of something that was disgusting.
Reviled, right? That you were so different than what everybody else did.
Why? Why did you want that, Zach?
Because I felt cool about being Satan. And I was
so powerful.
I was an angry adolescent, as many of us were, and so I have this excellent analogy, the story of this moment. I'll say the observation first. This is my observation and opinion. It's the year 2020, and nobody is an actual National Socialist Nazi. That team got beat, got destroyed. That you're in in Arkansas, swastika tattoo. You're not a Nazi. You just want to be disgusting. And you want to be in a group, and you want to feel the camaraderie of I'm a villain, and here are my villain friends. And look, when people see me and they see my tattoo, they think, ugh. There's like people don't like go looking around through the menu of worldviews. And you're like, let me see, Hinduism, hippies, Burning Man seems cool, but Nazism. Like it's so clear to me. So I had this. I'll very briefly tell the story. I was around this bonfire, and this I worked at a haunted house. It was at 28 in Gratiot, and this lad appears. He was probably 20 something. I was 20 something at the time, and we got to talking. He was very, very nice, very like kind and apologetic and curious and just nice. And at some point we got deep with it and got drunker. And at some point he reveals like, yeah, I fucking got into some stupid shit, like, and shows me that and so this is after I had said that, like, because he was homeless at the time and like, very was having a rough point in his life. It seems like his life had been a rough point in his life. And he reveals this is after I said that he could come and spend the night. He reveals as a very crudely drawn swastika tattoo where I have a heart. And it tells me the story of like, I just fucking was so, lost and had no community, had no friends, family, and I found this thing. And now, like, just like in American History X, and that scene where he's in the shower and he looks at his and he's like, oh my God, like he was so ashamed of this. And in that moment, I silently made the decision, you can't come over, man. My dad, my Jewish father, not gonna be making breakfast and see that I'm be exposed, but I'm sorry, I'm not having you. And that was the thing. He ended up branding himself and got himself judged and excluded by me, however, so many years later, because he, seeking the community, this villainous shitty thing. And that showed me from henceforth, and and there's people who have been part of hate groups who then went on to go around the country and lecture why hate groups are stupid, and what the psychological reasoning is for why people gravitate towards these things that give them a feeling of acceptance. And I mean, maybe he was an outlier, and like all of these stories, people are an outlier. But I think that when there's something that is a grouping like that is just that the main thing about it that it's characterized by is how much it is hated and reviled, and how much it is based around hate and negativity and awfulness. People are just sick, sad, lost puppies, man.
But and here's the thing that I do think that some of it is like exactly what you're saying, that people kind of want to be different and they want to do it by being hated and reviled, and they're kind of looking for that peace. I also think that there's a different kind of more primal level, and that is a lot of people really view life as a zero-sum game. And if this is a zero-sum game, then your group wins or your group loses, and you need to fight other people. And whether that's for resources, whether that's for political power, whether that's for love, whether that's for recognition, or money, there's a lot of people believe that it's your family, your group, your tribe, physically against other people, and they're going to try to take it from you if you don't try to take it from them, because 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, that was kind of the common denominator. And I don't think we're that far from it if things go wrong. That the problem with, I think for me, the problem with this idea that there ever was a utopian society was a utopian society only exists until the armed kind of villains come over the hill, right? If you do not have the ability to physically defend yourself, and when it becomes even momentarily a zero-sum game, that you become overrun. So how do we have the ability to stand up to people who believe it's a zero-sum game, who would bring violence or hate or exclusion against us? But how do we still hold this idea? Because I think all four of us here, I mean, the people listening to us do, that this is a sum plus game, that we don't have to say somebody has to lose and other people, we get to win. I think that everybody can win if we are smart enough, hopefully. I would like to try to work for that outcome. And if it doesn't work out, then we see. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's teaching people that it doesn't have to be a ladder. It can be a table that we get bigger and we put more water in our soup so that more people can survive. But it's also, I mean, thinking of that person in Arkansas who felt the need to join the Nazi party or whatever, not Nazis, whatever they are at this point. That might have been the only tribe that they had. We have this innate need to be part of a group.
Yep.
And if that's all that's available to you to feel like you're safe, then that's all available to you. And then when they go to the cities and they meet the burners who say, peace and love, man, we can all do this together. Those are such starkly different realities that, again, we have to find that common ground before we could ever have a conversation with them. And it's, I mean, going back to what Amy Lynn was saying, like, I will never be a Nazi. I do not agree with anything that they're saying. But again, I can try to see that other side of the coin and walk in their shoes and how hard of a life they must have had and how hard that reality must be to live in a place where the world is against you. That sucks.
Yeah.
And how do we pull those people out of that?
Like,
right.
I've seen that's in fact, I feel almost Maybe like checking with my emotions. Yeah, I feel almost exactly similar. Somebody walks up and they're adorning a Nazi swastika, you know, because it used to mean other things before it got appropriate douchebags. But I feel the same way as like I've been in Reno, Nevada, and I've been approached by somebody who was tweaking on meth, and it's like, okay, you have a problem, and I want to have empathy for it, and I would love to help you, but right now your problem, your symptoms are so that I'm in danger. I'm going to avoid you. And I feel the same way about somebody who's expressing Nazi shit. It's like, it's like, you got a problem, bro.
Did anybody watch that
But it's
Joe
not
Rogan
my
episode
place.
with Daryl Davis? Did anybody watch that?
Yeah, amazing.
No.
Yeah, Daryl Davis is amazing. Yeah, tell about Daryl Davis.
He's this guy. He's this like black Southern jazz musician. I think he plays saxophone or something like that. And he has a closet full of hundreds of Klan robes.
Oh, I've heard about him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's incredible, and he's such a good example of how this stuff works. Because his whole thesis about how he's able to go hang out with them and stuff like that, it's so beautiful. Because he's like, I know you're not talking about me. You don't know me. So whoever the hell you think you're hating isn't me. So I'm going to go in and see who you think you're hating.
Yeah. And his appearance on Rogan, I got to say, I've absorbed several pieces of media about him, and others are far more. He gets the full opportunity to express what he's about and what he's up to.
Yeah,
and
great.
His mission now is to make. I'll put the actual link to Daryl Davis on the Joe Rogan Experience in there. His mission is to make a museum that about.
And he's got the robe of like the top guy and like the guy below him, and like he goes to the meetings. He's familiar with the whole hierarchy. Like it's insane. He's like a part of their lives. But
I think there's a movie made about this, right?
Thank you so much for inviting me on this. You guys, sorry to interrupt, but I have to go. This has been fucking awesome. I'm honored to be
Chris.
here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
And me and Chris want to have a podcast soon where we interview someone or several someones who are true believers in the QAnon conspiracy movement.
Yeah,
reality tunnel.
All right. Have fun, everyone. I'll talk to you later.
Cheers.
Thanks, Chris.
Nice. So for the audience right now, we're kind of talking about how do we find this kind of winding middle path when you're part of a group, and how do you find groups that really fit you? So these are some questions I'd like to throw at you. So we've had some answers here like this. The curiosity came from you guys, and this idea of nonviolent communication, which is really getting at other human beings' needs. So what are some other things that you've found that help you kind of walk that middle path? Or how do you keep your individuality in a group when group opinions start to get strong? Because that can be hard. So there's a quote while we're doing that I wanted to bring up before, because Chris had said something. It took me too long to find it. And this is from Groucho Marx. I refuse to join a club that would have me as a member.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Exactly, right? So the idea here is I think that there's this piece that it's really good, especially in creative communities, to have open communities, right? To invite anybody in. But at the same time, I think there's something to be said for initiation. This idea that there's something mysterious in a trial that you have to go through, because once you go through it, not only do you value the group and the experience more, but you also feel more connected to the people who went through that sort of trial with you. And I always say that the reason why Burning Man can have as a principle radical inclusion is because the desert used to be the radical excluder. That before there's this entire infrastructure in Reno and across the country where people get RVs, you can go to Walmart and all of these things that made it so easy that you kind of had to fight to get to Burning Man. And it was hard and it was dusty, and it still is for many people, but it's not nearly as hard as it used to be. And so I sometimes see that in some kind of like regional burner communities, some of these satellite events, that there's not always that same value that people had when they came in to the original burn. So how do we create an initiatory experience to a group that isn't controlling or demeaning, that really brings value to the person coming into that group, and making sure that, so in a way that they're making sure that they're making the right decision, by putting that extra effort in to value it?
I mean, when it comes to like Burning Man specific, even just having them recite the principles, like making sure that they know what the initiation, while I agree with you that it should be some cool, mysterious, ritualistic, it should also be educational as to like what the community values are, what is their mission, and do you align with those? Because if you don't, then maybe you don't need to be there.
Right. We kind of had to do that with the Detroit Fire Guild. Is that for a while we were completely open, but people started spitting fire using the name Detroit Fire Guild, being completely unsafe, which was risking the whole community. So we kind of codified principles based on Burning Man, and there was a membership, and that was kind of controversial because all of a sudden this thing that was open wasn't anymore. But it also showed that people who were involved were volunteering and working. And same thing's kind of true like with Theater Bazaar. Like if you don't volunteer, if you're not working, like people see that, like people value those who work the hardest, and that in a way is an initiation.
Yeah, and there's that
valuing
bureaucracy. Yeah, there's kind of like, I mean, while you mentioned, Rick, the don't be like, it shouldn't be harmful, the jadedness and the like fuck you if you're not actually volunteering or putting in the work, that is a palpable feeling that can hurt some people. And maybe you don't need to be there, or maybe you need to volunteer more.
And it brings us back to like sometimes just should feel uncomfortable. Like in comfort is feedback, and we don't have to like run crying every time we're uncomfortable. Sometimes it's a sign that no, this is not the right thing for me. I'd rather sit and watch a show. I don't want to have to sweat for 40 hours in order to be part of a show.
Yeah. Okay, so I kind of founded a thing that my goal was to have something that had a lower barrier of entry than Burning Man, but some similar things of Burning Man, and this is Nonsense Night and the Nights of Nonsense. And now, so this, I'm just kind of realizing this now, that so instead of having to go out to the middle of a desert or go to a several day camping event where you need to be self-sufficient and you know, there's people see there being criteria to be a burner. And so I wanted to make something where it's like you just gotta show up and I don't know. And instead of having 10 principles, there are 3 non-institutional suggestions that are just don't try to define it, don't take it serious, and don't attempt anything mutual without each other's mutual enthusiasm. And you don't get ejected for doing something non-institutional. It's just kind of it's not even a finger wag. It's just like we don't. There are no consequences. It's just kind of suggestion. So that's been cool, and it's been cool to see people just kind of drop in, maybe see that, oh, this really isn't my thing, or some people just really take to it and love it. But because it's so undefined, it doesn't give you that same feeling that you get from being part of something that is exclusive, being something that is very defined
or worked for, because now it's exclusive, but you gotta work for it. You gotta put that effort in.
Yeah, and it crystallizes as an identity too, which that's something that I really love about Nonsense things and Burning Man, and it is something that I would say I flat out don't like and avoid, and perhaps even, let's just say, something like hate or I'm very angry with identities that solidify you as something. I think that I don't like this I don't like identities. I don't find that identifying with something that I am, I go through phases. So I was kind of a Christian at one point, was really into being that I am a Jew at one point. I've been a Boy Scout, I've been gothy, I've been a juggalo, I've been a hippie, I've been like a liberal lefty, I've been like a consciousness kid, festy, fucking I hate to say new agey, but you know, just like a galaxy brain fucking person. Everything is love and light sort of shit. I'm so the fuck not that anymore. But if I was crystallized at any of these other things, like, you know, somebody who goes out and gets a swastika tattoo, it's like that fucking stays with you. You were that. So I had this phase where I joined up into something that its main appeal to me was that it was disgusting to other people. I'm so glad that it was juggaloism and not Nazism. However, I don't have a barrier of entry to Nazism because got too much Jewishness going on.
That would be one hell of a dialectic there.
Yeah, that thing right there is what I think is unhealthy about bad group identity, group dynamics, and what I strive for is like, let's not create something that causes someone to feel like their choices today crystallize who or what they are. Just come and fuck around and find out for a while. You know?
And I agree. But let's kind of play the dialectic on that, right? So if we were all just muscle but no bone, we wouldn't have any leverage. That I do believe that a certain amount of judgment and belief in holding a certain identity creates a structure which allows you to move and get things done. That building habits and a lifestyle over time allows you to specialize in a way that allows you to have something that has more impact.
Yeah, like a marriage. Like
right.
That's one of the ultimate groups.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that comes back to that balance between acceptance and change, that balance between commitment and letting things flow. That if you don't have structure, you are just an amorphous jellyfish. Which is
going back to sorry, go ahead.
No, that's good. Good.
Going back to the muscle versus bone thing, we think of bones as like these solid structures. They grow. Mm-hmm. We grow into different things. And so, like, yes, having the structure is necessary, but then growing into whatever's evolving and whatever's changing, whatever science comes in, is more than important. It's essential to good living.
Right. Another metaphor along those same lines is the difference between a cage and a scaffolding, right? Like, do you have structure long enough to build a beautiful tower beneath it, or do you have structure that stays locked and prevents you from moving and you never take it down? Like, I think structured effort for a time is very powerful, and I think that kind of holding onto a belief for a time is very powerful.
Yeah. The scaffolding gets you somewhere, the cage keeps you somewhere. And so with a group, are we going somewhere together because we've all agreed as individuals who are consciously mutually volunteering to do something as a group together, or are we fucking solidifying as this? We're this, and now we're here, and now we're gonna
think this way, and this is what we believe in. And yes, I mean, it can get very constraining, or it can be something that moves people forward. And I think that's the question for me. This is why I tend to be prefer to be parts of groups, and whether this is friends, or whether this is a partnership, or whether this is like a larger community that's about creating something together rather than being against something. And that's very important to me, because I find the more that I am against something, the more fights and arguments I'm getting into. The more that I am looking to create something, the more opportunities I find, the more fun I have, the more things come into my life. Now, sometimes you need to be against something, because that Nazi coming at you, that you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to be creative with you as they're pummeling you. You need to fight back. But I think that's that 2% or that 20% of the dialectic, where that other part, I find it more helpful to be in more forward-moving groups and that sort of thing.
Yeah, if you're a part of a group that is an anti-group, that is a hate group, what happens if you succeed in getting rid of the thing that you don't like? Then it's like, do we have anything in common anymore?
Like what do we do?
I like man, I like racquetball. It's like, no, man, we used to hate something. We used to have something to hate together.
Right.
Now we're just here, and I don't even know if we have much in common, bro. I think we can disband.
Or you become the new empire, right? The rebels eventually beat the empire. Then they are the empire that need new rebels. Like it's a never-ending cycle.
I definitely think that. I see that in myself sometimes, where it's like when I really just get just anything that is authority, anything that is power is enemy, and then I start thinking, it's like, well, what would I do? And then it's like, and I can see the thing where you become the very thing that you oppose. Like, nobody should have the ring. You got to throw it in the fire.
So I think this has been a really good conversation. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, and I think that this can go. I mean, man, this could be a podcast in itself. It's because it's such a pillar of what humanity is and does.
Mm-hmm. But I really like the fact that kind of our common thread in these podcasts is how do we find that flexible, wise middle ground, that shifting middle ground that allows the flexibility of both extremes and does so in a way that moves towards something creative. And I think that's kind of the heart of what we're talking about here. Right.
Yeah.
So this is good. Chrissy, it was really good. Magic, is really good to have you here today.
This has been amazing. I love you both so dearly.
Yeah, it's been great being in this group with you.
This is a great group.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This tribe, this chosen.
Hell of a grumble. Look at this grumble.
It's a great grumble. So what are we grumbling against? What are we going to bring down with our grumbling?
The duffel bag of seals.
All right, down with the seals.
Down with the seal clubbers. I'll join an anti-group right now if we're gonna go club the seal clubbers.
Club the seal clubbers. I'm not that group to club the seal clubbers.
Yeah.
Get a better hobby. Start knitting or something.
Henry,
Knit the seals a little sweater or something.
Form a club, a seal clubber clubbing club.
No, you need little shade structures for the seals. It's getting warm up there. They don't need sweaters.
They need boats.
They do. They need seal boats.
The Navy SEALs. Okay.
All right. Well. Well, everybody, be safe. Be smart. Maybe. Be excellent to each other. Happy reality. This has been great.
Okay. Cheers, everybody.
It was wonderful. Love y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.